March 17th, 2025, and I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, your Red State refugee, and welcome to the Radical Russ Show, coming to you from Rolla J Studios in my undisclosed mountain hideaway in the beautiful state of Jefferson region of Southern Oregon.
And it goes down smooth. Hey!
Happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. Hope you're wearing a little bit of the green and celebrating safely out there. You know, the kind of green I'll be celebrating with, but be lucky if I can light it, because my goodness, I think we're ready for 40 days and 40 nights of flooding here in the Southern Oregon region. I don't know if you've seen any of the weather forecasts, but we have been deluged with rain here. I swear, I saw some old bearded guy building an ark just down the way. It was crazy. Yesterday, the rain just would not stop, and where I'm living is a little RV park that's right by a creek called Wolf Creek. And this creek in the summertime is completely dried up, and even in the winter when it's wetter out, it's still, you know, a small little creek. But yesterday, this came completely over the banks, flooding the trailer park. 7 or 8 of the trailers had to be moved. The water was getting so high it was going to get into the trailers. And our trailer is okay. We're on a bit of the high ground, so we were able to escape most of the devastation. But we did have the fun adventure of trying to put some tarps up on our roof to prevent some of the leaking from coming in. Oh my gosh, what a fun adventure that is. Every piece of clothing I own is soaked to the bone. There's supposed to be more rain today too, so we'll see if we survive this, but I think we're okay for now. Thanks for all the well wishes that I got through social media. Again, you can follow me on social media. I'm at radicalruss.com on Blue Sky, and I'm also at Radical Russ on everything else, like Twitter X and Facebook and Instagram and the rest of them, but I don't post there anymore. I don't do Meta platforms or Elon Musk's Nazi pub anymore. So you can find me on Blue Sky if you want to chat. Now, coming up on today's show, we are firmly in the ignore courts and jail enemies phase of this descent into American fascism. We're going to look at the 14 organizing principles of fascism and how the United States of America is currently meeting every single one of them. On the international front, the United States is bombing Yemen and the Houthis over the blockade of an important strait there that is important for global shipping, and the Houthis are doing this in response to the blockade of Gaza that is now starving over 500,000 children. We've got to look at yet another MAGA pedophile out there. This one with a name that's unfortunately close to my family, but not for that reason. We'll talk about that. Also, J.D. Vance is out there giving some interviews where he worries about the collapse of European civilization with the longest euphemism for the N-word that I've ever heard. We'll also take a quick look at what's going on with the confirmation hearings for Dr. Oz to be the head of Medicare and Medicaid. I know with everything going on, we forgot that was happening as well. We've got the national parks workers being muzzled now when it comes to all of the closures and the lack of facilities that'll be happening under these Doge cuts. We have another look at our regular Boycott Idaho segment, where the state of Idaho's Republicans are scrambling to try to ban medical marijuana any way they can. They're trying once again to amend their constitution to do so. And we'll close shop by taking a look at the fight for the soul of the Democratic Party as the leader of the minority in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, begins a book tour. Yeah, perfect timing, Chuck. A book tour. All that's coming up on the Radical Russ Show. Stay tuned. Well, you remember back to Donald Trump's first term when he was beginning this descent into American fascism, and those of us on the left were saying, watch out, this guy's a fascist. And we got tutted by the center, by the moderates, by all the adults in the room. Oh, don't use the F word, fascism. Oh, we only use that for the Nazis. Fascism. Fascism can't happen here in America. This is just differences of opinion. They're just conservatives. No, folks. We are descended fully into fascism. This is not like we're heading there, not like the train is on the tracks. We're there, folks. This is fascism. And maybe you don't recognize it because the movies make you want to believe that fascism means tanks in the streets and armed soldiers on every corner and checking your papers wherever you go. Well, we're getting there. We haven't got the tanks in the street yet. We don't have the police on every corner yet, just because there hasn't been any major protests to put down yet. There's been some. We got people protesting the Tesla dealerships. That's kind of cool. But the fascism that I'm talking about has 14 defining characteristics as studied by the people or as laid out by the people who study fascism for a living. Let me just get to a couple of the stories that demonstrate what we're going through right now. The big one, of course, is there was a plane load, 3 different planes of Venezuelans, or not necessarily Venezuelans, a plane load of headed to Venezuela of what the Trump administration claims are gang members, the MS-13, the Tren Arugula, whatever the hell they're called. I forget that name. But they're just claiming, oh, they're terrible people. They're violent criminals. They're terrorists. We've got to get rid of them. Right. So they have these planes all set to go. 2 of them are in the air flying over the Gulf of Mexico, not the Gulf of America, the Gulf of Mexico. One of them's on the tarmac in Texas, getting ready to take off. And this goes before a judge on an emergency hearing. Judge James Boasberg blocked Donald Trump from doing this. Now, the way Trump is trying to justify getting these planes sent over to Venezuela or El Salvador, or wherever the hell they're going, is to invoke what's called the Alien Enemies Act. And this is from like the 1700s, like 1798 or something like that. The Alien Enemies Act gives the president exclusive emergency wartime powers to designate anyone a alien, criminal, terrible person and have them deported, sent them overseas. And the judge said, no, you can't really do that because the Alien Enemies Act requires that there be a declaration of war. You have to be in wartime to be able to use that act. We are not at war with Venezuela or these people. So you got to turn the planes around now. Turn the planes around now. Bring them back to the United States. These people haven't had their due process. You just can't have the president declaring that someone's bad and then with no lawyer, with no warrant, round him up, throw him on a plane, send him to some terrible prison in El Salvador or wherever the hell they're going. And Trump ignored them. Trump ignored the judge's order, and they allowed the planes to continue through the air on their way to the prisons. According to Trump, he said, I can tell you this, these were bad people. These alleged gang members. And maybe they are. Maybe they are terrible people. But, you know, we determine that through our courts. We determine that through a due process, not by the declaration of Mad King Felon I. He ignored the order. The planes continued on. The excuse given by little Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, was that the planes at the time were over international waters. Therefore, the judge didn't have any jurisdiction. Well, that's not how that works. That's not how international waters works. That, we're like base in tag, right? I'm on base. You can't tag me. That's not the way international waters work. This has to do with whether or not the people had their due process met. It doesn't matter where those people are at the time their due process is being interfered with. If it didn't matter, then this is what the cops would do all the time, right? They would just take you over a border and do whatever the hell they want to do with you. Take you out offshore 3 miles and do what the hell they want to do to you. That's not the way it works. American officials are subject to American laws and declarations by American judges, no matter where those American officials are at the time. But even if that were a legitimate excuse, it would only apply to the 2 planes that were flying over the Gulf of Mexico. There was a third plane on the tarmac in Texas that had yet to have taken off when the order was given, and they told it to take off anyway. Fly more of these people who had no due process to El Salvador. The president of El Salvador posted footage of this on the social media site X, of the men being taken off the plane, heads down with, the armed guards around them. And the headline that the president of El Salvador tweeted out read, "Federal judge orders deportation flights carrying alleged Venezuelan gangbangers to return to the U.S." The president of El Salvador posted that with, "Oopsie, too late," openly mocking the American judicial process. He followed that with the emoji for the crying, laughing and crying emoji, rolling on the floor, laughing my ass off emoji. That was then reposted by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who thanked the El Salvadorian president for his assistance and friendship. So we are fully in the disappearing dissidents phase, the ignoring court orders phase of fascism. We got another report. This one came across my social media page by a woman named Ileana Pacheco, who writes, quote, "I was detained by ICE at the airport in Puerto Rico. I thought it was a TSA agent asking me about my bag, given the fact that they were right by TSA. ICE asked to see my ID, which I was confused because I just had my photo scanned and ID verified. He asked me, 'What's your status in the U.S.?' I said, 'Citizen. Why?' He said, 'I need to verify that. Give me your passport.' I'm looking at him like, what the fuck? What are you detaining me for?" He said, "You fit the description." I'm like, what description? I give him my passport, and he said, "Always carry your passport." So I go to the other ICE agent next to him and asked, "What description?" He said, "You fit the description of someone who is not documented." I'm like, so what about the people who look American? They don't get stopped, right? And he said, "No. If you look undocumented, you will be detained." So yeah, criminal or not, they will detain any person of color. Now, do you know how that's possible, that they're now just detaining people who look like an immigrant? That was the Laken-Riley Act that got passed by our Congress that had Democrats voting for it, including a Democrat from my state of Oregon named Janelle Bynum, voted for the Laken-Riley Act that allows Immigration and Customs Enforcement to stop people like Ileana Pacheco who look like an immigrant and be able to ask them for their papers to prove that they're citizens. Look like an immigrant, fit the description. And that description sure doesn't look like Keith Urban. That description sure doesn't look like Nicole Kidman or Hugh Jackman or John Oliver, right? That description doesn't look like me. That description looks like a brown person, a Muslim person, a black person, an Asian person. This is where we're at, folks. We had a Brown University professor who just got deported. Her name is Dr. Rasha Alawi, or Alawi. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. She's a kidney transplant specialist and a professor at Brown University. She had a valid visa. She had a court order that said she was not to be deported, and they deported her anyway. They're ignoring court orders, folks. They're rounding up the brown people. And talking about ignoring court orders, they're also willing to ignore previous presidents. Donald Trump on his truth toilet posted this recently. This was, let's see what the date is on this. This was on the 16th. This was last night. He posted, "The pardons that Sleepy Joe Biden gave to the Unselect Committee of Political Thugs and many others are hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because of the fact they were done by autopen. In other words, Joe Biden did not sign them, but more importantly, he did not know anything about them. The necessary pardoning documents were not explained to or approved by Biden. He knew nothing about them, and the people that did may have committed a crime. Therefore, those on the Unselect Committee who destroyed and deleted all evidence obtained during their 2-year witch hunt of me and many other innocent people should fully understand that they are subject to investigation at the highest level. The fact is, they were probably responsible for the documents that were signed on their behalf without the knowledge or consent of the worst president in the history of our country, Crooked Joe Biden. He's trying to say that presidential pardons are not in effect anymore. He's willing to ignore all the way to the level of the presidential pardon, folks. And understand everything he just said there is a complete lie. Absolute lie. Not a bit of truth about it. First of all, this signing by autopen, no, those pardons were announced publicly. When he pardoned the January 6th committee, he had a big old press conference about it. So to say that Joe Biden had no idea what was going on, that someone autopen signed this for him, that it was a complete mystery of who he was pardoning, is absolute bullshit. He knew exactly who he was pardoning. And the proclamation that they destroyed and deleted all their evidence, dude, it's still up on the web. You can Google this and read the entire report. You can see all the evidence. It's just so amazing that we have this completely separate information sphere in which people live, where Donald Trump can just lie to them, just out and out lie, and they will take it as gospel truth, and they will hear no refutation of that through any of their so-called news sources. It'll just be taken as gospel. We are at the stage now of ignoring court orders and disappearing our enemies. There were 14 characteristics of fascism that were first defined back in spring of 2003. Dr. Lawrence Britt, a political scientist, came up with this, and he studied the fascist regimes of Hitler in Germany, Mussolini in Italy, Francisco Franco in Spain, Suharto in Indonesia, and Pinochet in Chile. These 5 very legendary, if you will, or infamous, probably a better word, fascist regimes, and found 14 items they all have in common. See if any of this sounds familiar to you. Powerful and continuing nationalism. Fascist regimes tend to make constant use of political mottos, slogans, symbols, songs, and other paraphernalia. Flags are everywhere. Flag symbols on everything. Disdain for the recognition of human rights. Human rights can be ignored in certain cases because of need. Fear of enemies and the need for security will look the other way and approve of torture, executions, assassination, long incarcerations, etc. Identification of enemies or scapegoats as a unifying cause. Well, gee, we've got that, don't we? Oh, the immigrants. Oh, the immigrants. Supremacy of the military. Military is given disproportionate amounts of funding. Soldiers in military service are glamorized. Rampant sexism. Fascist nations tend to be almost exclusively male-dominated. Have you seen the picture of all the Republican chairs in the Congress now? All white dudes. Not a single woman in a position of leadership. Under fascist regimes, gender roles are made more rigid. Opposition to abortion is high. Homophobia, anti-gay legislation, and transphobia are made a part of national policy. It's the first thing the Nazis did. People don't realize that. The first thing the Nazis did wasn't to go after the Jews. First people the Nazis went after were trans people. They burned a library full of trans research. Yeah, look that up. Controlled mass media. Direct control by the government or indirectly controlled through regulation, sympathetic media spokespeople. Lots of censorship in the media. Obsession with national security. Fear as a motivational tool. Religion and government are intertwined. Well, there you go with the whole abortion thing, with the office of faith or whatever the hell it is that Paula Dean is in charge of. or Paula White. I'm sorry. Paula Dean's the other white racist lady. Religion and the corporate power is protected. All sorts of protection for Tesla, protection for SpaceX. Labor power is suppressed. Yeah, fights against unions and labor power. Disdain for intellectuals and the arts. A censorship of academics. Obsession with crime and punishment. Police are given almost limitless power to enforce laws, like grabbing people, asking for their papers, putting them on planes to El Salvador. Rampant cronyism and corruption is the 13th bit of fascism. Cronyism and corruption, that's right. We've got the CEO of the World Wrestling in charge of our education. Yeah, no kidding. And fraudulent elections. That's our next step, folks. Fraudulent elections. If the one in 2024 wasn't fraudulent, and I'm not so sure it wasn't. When you look at those 14 identifying factors for fascism, the United States is checking every box. Later on in this program, we'll talk about what the Democrats might do about it. You may recall when Trump was running for his second term, he had a whole bunch of criticism for Joe Biden and the fact that if he were president, boy, there wouldn't be a war in Ukraine. There wouldn't be all this war. All these Democrats want to go to war, and he's Mr. Peace. Well, he wants to have peace. Well, again, another lie coming out of the orange-faced Gibbon. In this case, we're talking about the violence that's been exacted against the Houthis in Yemen, where recent U.S. airstrikes have killed over 100 people, including children. The Houthis claim they have attacked the USS Harry Truman, one of our carriers out there. And this is all over one of these straits in the Gulf of Aden. And, right off there between Djibouti and Yemen is the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, this little thin bit of waterway. After the ships have come through the Suez Canal, through the Mediterranean, through the Suez Canal, down the Red Sea, and that's where they exit to get out into the larger ocean for shipping. Because of these Houthi attacks, a lot of companies have had to go around the long way. Instead of taking the Suez Canal, they have to sail around the Cape of Good Horn there in Africa, all the way around the bottom of Africa to get around. It adds a lot of expense to the shipping. The U.S. says they're targeting the leaders of the Houthi rebels there who are attacking ships in the strait. And the reason they're attacking the ships in the strait, according to the Houthi rebels, is to fight against Israel and their blockade of Gaza. On March 2nd, Israel blocked all aid that was coming into Gaza, which again is leading to the starvation and disease of the Palestinian people. So the Houthis' chief set a 4-day deadline and said if you did not reopen the crossings and allow aid in to the Palestinian people, the Houthis would resume attacking Israel-linked ships passing through that strait on their way to the Suez Canal. On March 11th, they resumed their operations against Israeli ships, began attacking them to pressure Israel to end its war on Gaza. And they stopped their attacks when there was a ceasefire declared in Gaza back in January 19th. So I don't want to take sides on this. It's not that I'm saying the Houthis are good necessarily. But what else are countries supposed to do when we have the situation that's going on in Israel where the Bibi Netanyahu government, another government taking its country down the road to fascism, or quite a way there, are letting innocent people die, are committing a genocide in Gaza, with Trump eagerly looking on, hoping to build some condos and make some money there, and the evangelicals backing him, hoping to hasten the apocalypse so that Jesus can come home. It's just a terrible situation. Children are being killed on this. The Houthis say our position is clear and our demand is simple. Lifting the siege on Gaza and saving the people of Gaza from starvation is what they're all about. Stop starving the people in Gaza, they'll stop attacking the ships. Our response, of course, is to attack them so that Israel can continue attacking the people in Palestine. It's so transparent anymore. It's hard for me to understand the people who are still backing Israel in this situation. I understand the strategic importance. I understand the long-time alliance. I understand how people see the need for the state of Israel to exist to be the only democracy within all these kingdoms and Muslim caliphates that surround it. But it's time to recognize that we're the baddies. U.S., Israel, Russia, Iran, North Korea, China. We are becoming the axis of evil. We are the countries that the rest of the world fears. We are the evil that haunts their nightmares. And that's not where I want us to be. It's time to... I don't know what it's time to. I don't know how to fix this situation. We're in a bad enough situation here in the United States fighting for ourselves, much less trying to help the people all around the world that our government is attacking. All I know is that there are 50,000 maybe people that have been killed, hundreds of thousands displaced in Gaza, an area that I always like to remind my audience is about the size of Boise's Treasure Valley in Idaho. About the same size as Boise's Treasure Valley, from the east of Boise to the west of Caldwell, the north of Eagle to the south of Cuna is about the same size as Gaza, with about 5 times as many people in it. All been reduced to rubble. Once again, every accusation is a confession when we're talking about the MAGA movement and the Republicans in general. The story we got now comes out of the Texas Gateway megachurch, where the founding pastor, named Robert Morris, was indicted for lewd acts with a child. Yes, and this caught my eye because the Robert Morris I know is my cousin who played linebacker for the Indianapolis Colts for like 9 years and won a Super Bowl with them. No, not that Robert Morris. He actually goes by Rob. This is the Robert Morris, this Gateway Church megachurch pastor, one of these, holier than thou types out there, who's indicted for lewd acts with a child. And the kicker is that Robert Morris was Trump's spiritual advisor for his first term and has been a close campaign advisor advocating for the alleged family values platform. And the thing that's really amazing about this is, for years, you get the QAnon people, you get them all talking about the Democratic pedophile ring run out of a basement of a pizza parlor that doesn't have a basement. They're always talking about the pedophiles, shoot your local pedophile, but when it comes to their side, they don't seem to notice all the pedophiles' calls are coming from inside the house. They will turn a blind eye to this like they've turned a blind eye to all the rest of them. Here's a guy who's a close spiritual advisor of Donald Trump, found to be, or alleged to be, diddling kids. Yet, Trump, of course, was found liable for sexual assault against E. Jean Carroll, brags about grabbing women by the pussy. Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Court Justice, credible allegations of sexual assault. Florida Republican Matt Gaetz, substantial evidence of prostitution, statutory rape. Nothing. You hear nothing from that side. And just go to your favorite search engine. Mine is DuckDuckGo now. Go to your favorite search engine and just type in Republican lawmaker sexual assault, or type in evangelical Christian sexual assault. And you will see So many results, page after page after page of results from these people. Try the same search with drag queen sexual assault. Try the same search with transgender sexual assault, and you won't get nearly the volume of responses. It is to be understood that sexual assault, sexual predation, knows no particular party, right? We got your, Andrew Cuomo's and Harvey Weinstein's on the left, Bill Clinton and such. But when our side engages in these sexual crimes, we call them out for it. Except for the Bill Clinton one. I wish we could do a little more calling out of that one. But for all the wailing and gnashing of teeth about the groomers, the drag queens are going to assault the kids, it's the Republicans. It's churchy. Yeah. Y'all know that I'm an atheist. I don't understand people's need for religion, but I understand that they have that need for religion. And I respect their right to have that need for religion. But there's always been something about it that's bothered me. And that is this need to have some sort of supernatural judgment, else you'll commit sin, right? Like, well, I've had people actually say this when I'm they learn I'm an atheist. They're like, well, if you don't believe in God, what's stopping you from going out and raping and killing and stealing? I don't know, empathy, basic morality, right? But that question there kind of begs the question, so if you didn't have a God, you would be out there raping and pillaging and killing? That's how I feel about these Republicans when they're calling out the pedophilia and worried about the assaults on kids. It is, so much projection going on. And I don't know about you, but if any institution were found so often to be housing pedophiles and sexual assaulters, I don't think I'd take my kids there, right? I mean, I like taking the grandkids to Chuck E. Cheese, but if every week some Chuck E. Cheese employee was indicted for sexual assault of a minor, I might stop taking my kids to Chuck E. Cheese. Got a couple more quick takes to get to here on the program. With everything that's happening with the migrants on the planes and the ignoring the constitutional orders and the Democratic Party leadership falling apart and okaying the continuing resolution that pretty much gives Trump and Musk a blank check to dismantle our federal government. With all that stuff that's going on, oh my God, you can lose some of the crazy that's going on. And one of those little bits of crazy I wanted to make sure that we talked about was the hearings for Dr. Oz. You remember Dr. Oz ran for the Senate seat in Pennsylvania and lost it to John Fetterman. And at this point, I'm not sure that was a win for us. But anyway, Dr. Oz is back because Trump has nominated him to be in charge, be the administrator, I guess, of Medicare and Medicaid. Yeah, this quack who's sold the snake oil for weight loss, all these products that he's shilled for that have proven to be, frauds. This guy got to be in charge of our Medicaid and Medicare. So they're currently going through the motions of asking him questions on Capitol Hill that he'll lie about or deflect and completely reverse stance on later, because what's the point of these hearings anyway? Yeah, we saw Pam Bondi lie through her teeth. We saw RFK lie through his teeth. They're just going to say whatever they got to say to get through the hour or 2 hours or whatever it is and wait for themselves to be rubber stamped by the fascists and the GOP. But anyway, they're going through the motions, and my senator, Ron Wyden, is questioning Dr. Oz. And let's just listen to that questioning.
Do you believe in a nursing home there should be a registered nurse available around the clock 24/7? The reason I ask this is because that is the rule that is coming up, but there's going to be an effort to roll it back. So do you think we ought to have nursing homes without nurses?
Senator Wyden, as you know, it's a complicated question.
No,
Because
it's
we
not.
don't.
We need a nurse in a nursing home. Not too complicated.
I actually think we need a nurse who will work in a nursing home. And in many nursing homes, that's become a problem. So I believe we can provide quality of care equivalent to having a nurse in that nursing home using tools and technologies, including telemedicine.
Do you believe?
So we're gonna have telemedicine take care of our elderly in the nursing homes. Yeah, that's it. When a 95-year-old is having some difficulty, let's have her log on to something. Because 95-year-olds in the computer, they're so good at it, right? They'll just log on to something. They want to short staff our nursing homes. They want to cut more dollars by having your nana get online to talk to someone when she's having some difficulty. We can't even have nurses in nursing homes. That's the insanity we're at here when we're dealing with these people. There was another bit I wanted to get to featuring J.D. Vance, and he was on the Ingraham angle, one of these Fox programs, talking about the migration of immigrants to Europe, and goes into a little bit of what they call the Great Replacement Theory. Let me play a clip from this.
These things are going to last beyond political disagreements, but I think that Europe, and frankly, I would have said this about America a year ago, but Europe is at risk, I think, of engaging in civilizational suicide. They are unable to, or unwilling, too many countries to control their borders. You see them starting to push back against that, and good, that's a good thing. You see them starting to limit the free speech of their own citizens, even as those citizens are protesting against things like the border invasion that got Donald Trump and a number of European leaders elected. So look, I want Europe to thrive. I want them to be an important ally. Part of that is going to be Europe respecting its own people, respecting its own sovereignty, and America can't do that job for them. If you have a country like Germany, where you have another few million immigrants come in from countries that are totally culturally incompatible with Germany, then it doesn't matter what I think about Europe. Germany will have killed itself, and I hope they don't do that because I love Germany and I want Germany to thrive.
Totally culturally incompatible. Boy, that's the longest euphemism for the N-word I've ever heard. Civilizational suicide. Do you get the racism inherent in what he's talking about here? Europe is this beautiful, civilized, white place full of white people and white civilization, and if more of the brown people show up, there'll be no more civilization, because, brown people aren't civilized. What the hell is this? This is more of that blood and soil, white makes right Christian nationalism that he cannot help but espouse. The idea that people of different cultures, of different religions, can get together and live in a civilized society and respect each other's cultures and traditions is anathema to these people. This is what they are fighting against. They call it the Great Replacement Theory. Their belief that white people and white culture will be destroyed by letting all the brown people come in and have their cultures. As if the brown people who come to the white places lose their cultures, right? Like, if what he was saying was true, then the people that are in the minority would automatically lose their cultures, wouldn't they? That's his theory, right? Is that white people are the majority and white culture is dominant. And then if a whole bunch more brown people come in, they'll outnumber the white people and then brown culture will be dominant. Except for the fact that you have a city like San Francisco that's a white city, very white, and yet there's a part of it that's Chinatown and very different from the rest of the white city. Like, there's New York City, which is a very white city that has very white area, but then you can go uptown to Harlem where it's more of a black culture, or Spanish Harlem where it's more of a Puerto Rican culture. There's places in Pennsylvania that are super white, and then you go to the center of Pennsylvania, and it's even whiter than that. They got Amish people, the whitest people you could possibly be. And that's what's beautiful about America. And what is beautiful about Europe is that we have all these different cultures, that we can all get along, that our culture becomes broader. What would America be without pizza and jazz and chow mein. I mean, that's what makes America great to me, is that nobody looks like an American. Anybody could look like an American. Anybody of any color or religion or gender presentation can look like an American. That's what makes America great, and that's what these people are trying to destroy. I've been saying for a while that the FO stage of FAFO is going to happen here this summer, as so many of these Trump voters, these MAGA types, start to recognize that, hey, government was doing good stuff for me. And I think one area where this is going to become very obvious is in recreation. Because one thing I know about these MAGA guys, love their hunting. They like to go hunting and fishing, right? No G on the end of those. Hunting and fishing. They like to go out on in their all-terrain vehicles and run around the parks, and they love to go camping, maybe hiking, right? Skiing, all these fun things that Americans like to do out in our national parks. Well, the Doge boys have been cutting the hell out of the national parks, firing all sorts of national parks workers. And so you know that the MAGAs are going to be upset about that. They go out to their favorite campground and they'll find that the toilets have been closed or the toilets are dirty. They'll find the algae has kicked up on their favorite lakes. They're going to find the visitor centers are closed. Little places where they can do their overlooks are closed. Popular attractions being canceled. Habitat restoration, falling apart. The places where they do bird watching or whatever. So, knowing that this is coming, knowing that the FO phase is coming for a lot of right-wingers out there, the Trump government, the Trump regime, has directed them, the frontline staff at the parks across the country, on how they're supposed to talk about all this. Getting their official talking points now. And they're being told not to blame any of these things for people being fired, to not use the word fired, and to not blame any of these closures on staffing levels. They're supposed to describe these as attrition or workforce management actions and prioritizing fiscal responsibility and staffing to meet the evolving needs of our visitors. They should tell visitors that the parks will continue to ensure memorable and meaningful experiences for all. If asked about limited offerings, the park rangers are instructed to say, "We're not able to address park or program level impacts at this time." Now, the parks people working at these parks, the ones that are left, aren't too happy about this. Many of them are delivering these lines in monotone. "We are not allowed to discuss park or program level impacts at this time," in order to show through sarcasm that they don't believe a word they're saying. This comes on the heels of some directives that have been given out to the National Institutes of Health and Health and Human Services of high-profile topics that they are not allowed to publish on without getting prior administrative approval. They're not allowed to talk about the cancer moonshot. This was the program that was developed and the terminology developed under the Biden administration to continue the research and development of vaccines on cancer, some of which are starting to prove effective. They believe with these RNA vaccines that were developed, this technology developed because of COVID, they might have vaccines now for certain types of cancers. Well, we can't discuss that without getting approval from Trump. We can't discuss COVID-19, vaccines, bird flu, opioids, marijuana, dietary guidelines, obesity, stem cell or fetal tissue research, abortion, autism, peanut allergies, fluoride, measles, DEI, gender ideology, environmental justice. Those are some of the topics that people that are researching and trying to protect our public health are not allowed to discuss without approval from the president or people in his administration. Peanut allergies. You can't talk about peanut allergies. Why is that? Well, because, again, RFK has this crazy belief that vaccines lead to the increase in peanut allergies because one of his kids has a peanut allergy, you see. And fluoride is terrible for whatever reason, right? All this QAnon level conspiracy theory junk has made it all the way to the highest levels of our government's scientific institutions. This is going to take years for us to recover from, folks. Time for our regular segment of Boycott Idaho. Make sure you avoid the handmaid state in any way. Plan your next ski vacation to Utah instead of Sun Valley. Get yourself some onion rings instead of Idaho potatoes. Shop somewhere other than Albertsons. Boycott Idaho because there is no state, no red state, more associated with one particular product than Idaho and the potato. And few red states as white and delightsome as Idaho, so you're harming as few people of color as possible. Boycott Idaho, boycott the Idaho potato. And our reason today, once again, comes down to the topic of marijuana. In the state of Idaho, the legislature there has been in dread fear since 1996, when California passed its medical marijuana initiative, and then in 1998, followed by Oregon and Washington. And then throughout the 2000s, the state of Idaho got surrounded by medical marijuana states, and to this day is the only Western state that has no safe marijuana law. There's no medical marijuana law. There's no legal marijuana. If you are caught with marijuana in the state of Idaho, you are arrested. You can be cuffed and taken to jail immediately. You will have a misdemeanor on your record. And, thanks to a law recently passed, a guaranteed mandatory $300 fine. They can be as high as $1,000. Mere possession of marijuana. And yet, this state, which in 2013 declared by resolution that marijuana shall never, ever, 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 ever be legal for any purpose, for anybody, for any reason, ever, till the end of time, marijuana shall be illegal in the state of Idaho. And again, to my knowledge, the only state that has ever proactively come out and said that. But Idaho is surrounded now by legal states of Oregon, Washington, California, Nevada, and Montana, and the country of Canada. And then Utah has its own medical marijuana, which is barely medical marijuana. I mean, it's the most restrictive medical marijuana state. Literally all their stuff is like prepackaged and it's just awful. But they at least have some medical marijuana. And even in Wyoming, they have a little bit of leeway for CBD type marijuana. But in Idaho, all marijuana is a crime, and they want to make sure it stays that way. And since 96, 98, they have been terrified that some big money national interest is going to come in and get a medical marijuana initiative passed in the state of Idaho. Now, it's funny to me because I was involved in the campaigns in 2016, 2018, and 2020, and 2022 to get some sort of marijuana initiative on the ballot in Idaho, and every effort has failed. Every effort, and the efforts before I showed up, have failed to even make the ballot, have failed to even gather half the number of signatures necessary to make the ballot. The money is just not there. And I've got contacts. I've got people in the national movement, funders, that had no interest whatsoever in putting any money into Idaho. We met numerous times. Oh, they had plenty of money to pour into South Dakota, though, where they did manage to pass marijuana legalization, and then their Supreme Court upended it. So a whole bunch of money wasted there. Nevertheless, Idaho, the legislature is terrified that marijuana is going to be passed by initiative, even though nobody's managed to pull it off. And even though now there's not a lot of grassroots want for passing marijuana legislation, because everybody in Idaho now is within, well, about 90% of the population, I should say, is within about an hour's drive from legal marijuana. The city of Ontario, the city of 11,000 people right across the border from the Treasure Valley metro area, has a dozen dispensaries that are selling $8 million worth of marijuana a month to those people coming across the Idaho border. So millions of dollars of legal marijuana is bought every month by Idahoans. They're just not buying it in Idaho. All their tax revenue is going to these other states. But there's not a lot of grassroots interest in getting marijuana legalized anymore because, again, the people who need it have the access to it. The state of Idaho is not really in need of any tax revenue. It's been a pretty booming economy in Idaho, and they've got plenty of tax revenue, so that argument doesn't work. You can't really use the arguments of marijuana being, racist or use any sort of civil rights arguments because there's not a lot of black people in Idaho. The people busted for weed in Idaho are white. So believe me, I tried to crack this nut many times and found it impossible to do so. If you want to make a bet on what state will never have legal marijuana, I would put your money on the state of Idaho. But even with all that, even with the lack of national interest, the lack of national funders, and the lack of grassroots interest, Idaho's legislature is still terrified that somebody's going to come along and pass a medical marijuana initiative. So now, the House and the Senate have passed HJR 4, House Joint Resolution 4, which is a proposal to put on the Idaho ballot in the next election a constitutional amendment. And this constitutional amendment would say only the legislature in the state of Idaho has the power to regulate the growing, production, and sales of marijuana, narcotics, and other psychoactive substances. They want to pass a constitutional amendment that says only the legislature can pass drug laws. Basically, they want to make it so that drugs are the only thing you can't pass an initiative for in Idaho. They want to carve out from the people's constitutional initiative power the ability to pass a medical marijuana initiative. Or for that matter, I guess, a psilocybin mushroom initiative or a ibogaine initiative or anything like that. Now, they have to do it through constitutional amendment because the people of Idaho have the initiative power to pass statutes, but they don't have the initiative power to pass constitutional amendments. So if they pass this constitutional amendment, there would be no recourse for the people. Medical marijuana initiatives would be banned forever in the state of Idaho unless they pass another constitutional amendment to repeal that amendment. So this would have to go before the voters, and the voters would have to pass it by a majority. But this is one of those situations that's going to be politically difficult to message because you're asking people to vote no to say yes to marijuana. You're asking them to say, if you ever want to have the chance in the future to ever pass medical marijuana, you first have to defeat this initiative. And there's another hang up with this. The people in Idaho, the activists there are a group that's called Kind Idaho, and they're still moving forward with another medical marijuana initiative campaign. Okay? So, when they have this campaign, let's say that despite the odds, they get the funding and they make the ballot. And both things are on the ballot. Suppose there's a medical marijuana initiative that would create a law allowing for medical marijuana in the state of Idaho. And there's this constitutional amendment to ban any initiative from legalizing medical marijuana in the state of Idaho. If both pass, the amendment wins and medical marijuana is banned. If they both made the ballot, the people of Idaho could, let's say, vote 75% in favor of medical marijuana. Okay, that might be a little high. The polling that we did back in my campaigns showed that about 72% of the people of Idaho supported medical marijuana. Let's say it's 70, whatever. Let's say the initiative passes with 70% of the people who want medical marijuana in the state of Idaho. But let's also say the amendment passes with 51%. That amendment wins. Even though 75% or 70% want medical marijuana, the amendment passing with 51% would trump it. Pardon the pun, I guess. Would outrank it. And even though 70% wanted medical marijuana, that initiative would be immediately canceled because of the amendment passing. And then you think, well, Russ, how's that going to happen, right? People would know, wouldn't they? Well, no, people are dumb. And the way the campaign is going to go, I can tell you how it's going to go from their side. They're going to avoid talking about medical marijuana with this initiative, with this amendment. And they're going to focus on drugs. We want to make it illegal for the out-of-state money interest to come in and pass an initiative that allows for the use of mushrooms, that allows for the use of opioids, that allows the legalization of drugs. Drugs. It's all about drugs. And I can imagine a lot of voters out there that aren't very savvy thinking, oh, yeah, I'm for medical marijuana, so I'm going to vote for the medical marijuana initiative. But I'm against legalizing drugs, so I'm going to vote for the anti-drug amendment. Not realizing that voting for the anti-drug amendment just killed their medical marijuana initiative. That's how much the state of Idaho hates marijuana. Join me in boycotting Idaho, the handmaid state. If you joined me Friday, you got to hear my lamentations about the return to Democrats' cave. That's right, the spelunking that goes on when Democrats refuse to stand up for their ideals and the American people. They retreat to Democrats' cave. And that happened with respect to this continuing resolution where last week the House Democrats stood almost united. One Democrat voted for it. All the rest of the House stood together in rejecting the continuing resolution to fund the government to avoid a government shutdown because it hands a blank check over to Doge and Musk and Trump to continue destroying our government. And a lot of these Democrats that stood against it were in Trump districts. So it was difficult for them politically to have to stand against this budget. The politics of this is, oh, if the Democrats don't support the budget, they're going to shut down the government, hurt government workers, they're going to hurt the government. And yet they were willing to take that risk to stand united, almost, in opposing Donald Trump. And we were so excited about that. Oh my God, they're finally standing up. Then it came to the Senate. And the Senate, of course, has the power of the filibuster, and they were filibustering this budget. With Chuck Schumer on Thursday getting up and saying, the Republicans need to put a clean continuing resolution. We're going to fight this. We're going to stand up against it. And the very next day, caving. The very next day, Schumer is saying, well, there are two bad options here, but, we can't shut the government down. Retreating to Democrats' cave to the immediate condemnation of AOC and people in the House who pointed out that they walked the plank. And now Schumer has blown a hole, according to AOC, blown a hole in the relationship between the Democrats in the House and the Democrats in the Senate. Betrayed us along with 9 others, including Fetterman from Pennsylvania, Dick Durbin, the octogenarian from Illinois, Kirsten, I forget which is which, Gillibrand out there in New York, the 2 senators from New Hampshire, and the surprise to me, Brian Schatz from Hawaii voted for this thing. Unbelievable. So everyone is shocked by this, by the betrayal of Chuck Schumer. And then it turns out He's got a book tour to go on today. Today begins a book tour for Chuck Schumer. His book tour is on combating anti-Semitism. That's right. Chuck Schumer wants to go back and talk about combating anti-Semitism after approving the continuing resolution that Trump wanted passed. Trump, the guy who just last week was saying that Schumer isn't Jewish. As far as he's concerned, he's Palestinian. Then we're going to go out on the road and talk about anti-Semitism. Now, throughout the rest of this week, we're going to report on how the protests will take place, because believe me, folks, Chuck Schumer is going to be protested on this. And yet he still has no idea how reviled he is at this moment. He has no idea the pulse of the Democratic Party at this moment. And I want to play this clip here. This is coming from MSNBC. And some of this, he had an interview, Chuck Schumer had an interview with the New York Times, and MSNBC got the audio from it. He's interviewing with the New York Times about this situation, and he's still as clueless as ever.
I don't think we have an authenticity problem. We have a real direction now. I feel good about it. I am hopeful that our Republican colleagues will resume working with us. And I talked to them. One of the places I told them to go in the gym, you know, when you're on that bike in your shorts, panting away next to a Republican, a lot of the inhibitions come off. I think we're fighting very hard on every front. And initially we've had some successes, but we got to keep at it, and we got to be open to new suggestions and ways to do it. But I think what we're doing is working.
Wow. Amazing. He thinks that he's on the treadmill next to the Republicans and, oh, they're good guys. I'm sure we'll be able to work together with them sometime soon. He has no idea what we're up against. He still thinks there's good Republicans. He does not see that the Republican Party has been completely transformed into a fascist white Christian nationalist movement. Because your gym buddies, they're going to work with you, huh? That's where we're at. That's what our octogenarian leadership thinks. We don't have an authenticity problem. We have a real direction now. We had a real direction until you blew it up. And of course, the response has been wonderful on the web. There's a meme going around now of Chuck Schumer. If Chuck Schumer were in various movies, the one that started I loved was if Chuck Schumer replaced Liam Neeson in Taken. This is Chuck Schumer as Liam Neeson in Taken. I don't know who you are or what you want, but I will find you and I will help you kill my daughter. Yeah, exactly. Or Chuck Schumer in Spartacus. Oh, there he is. He's Spartacus. That's the guy right there. That's Spartacus. That's Chuck Schumer in Spartacus. The one I submitted would be Chuck Schumer replacing Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. Morpheus is talking to Chuck Schumer and says, "This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe." Yeah, that's good. I'll take that one. That's Chuck Schumer, right? He does not realize he has lost the soul of the Democratic Party. Nobody wants to stand by this guy at this point. And the polls now are beginning to show it. The Democratic Party's favorability rating in a new CNN poll is now at a record low. Democrats and Democratic-aligned independents say 57% of them say Democrats should mainly work to stop the Republican agenda rather than working with them in a bipartisan fashion. And this was a poll that was taken before the retreat to Democrats' cave. Before they retreated to Democrats' cave, 57% of the people supporting Democrats said they should fight rather than work for bipartisanship. That's down. Actually, that was just 23% in Trump's first term. In Trump's first term, 74% of people supporting Democrats said, yes, you should work with Republicans. That number's down to 42% now because we recognize there's nothing to work with. There is no good faith negotiation. There's no more of this Washington, D.C. polity where Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan have drinks after Congress together. That doesn't exist anymore. We are at war with a fascist insurrection. Dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party? Just 63% of Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents have a favorable view of their own party, down from 72% in January and down from 81% at the start of Joe Biden's administration. By contrast, 79% of Republicans view Republicans positively. The public continues to describe a difference between Trump and his party. Americans are 9 points likelier to call the president too extreme rather than to say that the Republican Party as a whole is too extreme. Now, why would that be? How is it that the public manages to separate Trump and his fascism from the Republicans in general? How come they're not the same? Well, I'll give you an example why. There was a tweet or a post, I guess it's Skeet on Blue Sky. Hakeem Jeffries, the leader in the House, posted this yesterday. Far-right extremists are okay destroying Medicaid for black people in the ghetto, just as long as they are not their voters. These are sick people. Who? Who are the sick people? The far-right extremists are the sick people. Gosh, those far-right extremists sound like terrible people, Hakeem. We should do everything we can to oppose far-right extremists. But what about Republicans? Why can't you just call them Republicans? This is why the general public, by a 9-point gap, have more disfavorable views of Donald Trump than the Republican Party as a whole, because the leadership in the Democratic Party refuses to call out the enemies by their name. Every time you say some crap like the far-right extremists are doing, the far-right extremists are doing, the far-right extremists are doing, you allow a Republican voter out there to say, oh yeah, those far-right extremists sound bad. Good thing I don't vote for far-right extremists. I only vote for my local GOP congressman. I only voted for my local GOP representatives. I only voted for my GOP senator. I don't vote for far-right extremists. Those far-right extremists sound like bad people. I wouldn't want to support them. Good thing I don't. I'm a Republican. Name the enemy. Tie Trump and MAGA to the word Republican. Or just use the word Republican on its own. There's no separating them anymore. The Republicans are the fascists. Now, there's a couple of people out there that know this is going on and make some good points about this. I saw a post the other day calling the Democrats the Uvalde Police Democrats in honor, I guess, in recognition of those Uvalde police officers who stood outside the school while all the kids were getting shot. 150 of them or so that just stood there. That's how it feels right now. Our country's being shot up from the inside, and our police Democrats are just sitting outside waiting for someone to give them the order or something. And on the Republican side here, there's been some, I shouldn't say the Republican side, on the Democratic side, for those who are still retreating to Democrats' cave, they don't recognize that the fight now in the Democratic Party, and this was pointed out by, I think, one of the campaign advisors in Michigan, the fight in the Democratic Party right now isn't between the moderates and the far left, whatever that is in America. It's not a left-right, left-center debate right now. What's going on in the Democratic Party is fight or appease. And the fight part of the party and the appeasement part of the party, that's what's going on right now, is the fight between those two. And leading the fight on the fight side, I would say, is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. is Bernie Sanders, is Tim Walz, Jasmine Crockett, Jamie Raskin, Maxwell Frost. Those are the Democrats that want to fight. And the Democrats who want to appease don't like it so much. There was a post came across from Kyrsten Sinema, the former senator from Arizona. So Kyrsten Sinema, you may remember, was the roadblock to getting rid of the filibuster. When the first Trump administration was going along, or when we get Biden in office, and we want to pass some Democratic goals, some Democratic policies, the Republicans would be filibustering them, and we had this push to get rid of the filibuster. Let's get rid of the filibuster. It's bullshit that the minority party should be able to block what the majority wants to do. And it didn't go anywhere because even though the Democrats were in power at the time, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin would refuse to get rid of the filibuster. They say, we got to keep the filibuster. Boy, you wouldn't like it if we were in the minority and they were trying to do terrible stuff. We didn't have the filibuster. We got to have the filibuster. You got to be able to use the filibuster. We got to keep the filibuster. So when this latest round came around with the continuing resolution and we were filibustering it, and then Chuck Schumer gave up the filibuster and the continuing resolution passed, Kyrsten Sinema got online to gloat at AOC. Basically said something along the lines of, oh, change of heart on the filibuster, huh? Like, oh, now you like the filibuster now that we're in charge. Yeah. And she walked right into the trap. AOC was not having it. AOC basically came back and said, no change of heart at all. Because it was the same Democrats who say, oh, we got to keep the filibuster, who then don't use the filibuster, who then gave up on the filibuster. As AOC pointed out, the filibuster seems to exist just to block Democratic priorities. It's never used to block GOP priorities when we have the power. So what's the point of having the filibuster if we're not going to use it? A similar smackdown came when John Fetterman, who you can't convince me he's fully recovered from his stroke, folks. When John Fetterman, the Pennsylvania senator, who was one of the 10 to retreat to Democrats' cave, John Fetterman posted, I will never, ever, 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 never, ever vote to shut down the government. I will never shut down the government. Never, ever. And AOC responded, oh, cool. So if the next continuing resolution has a national abortion ban attached to it, you'll sign that too? It's just bad negotiation. Boy, you want to play poker with John Fetterman, don't you? I will never, ever, ever, ever bet on a hand with less than a pair. Never. I will never do that. I want to play poker with this guy. But Bernie Sanders is out there on tour. He's going to all these red districts where the GOP Congress people won't hold their town halls anymore. Tim Walz was doing something similar, going out there and holding town halls. This is the way. It's no more rolling over, play dead, no more, oh, well, let's just sit back and watch Trump destroy himself. And once Trump falls apart, oh, they'll come running back to us Democrats with open arms. It's no longer good enough to be the party of lesser evil. Full evil has arrived. It's time to be the party of good. Thank goodness we got Bernie Sanders out there, Tim Walz out there, people trying to make a difference. If you get a chance to attend any of these town halls, please do. We've got to start mobilizing to take back our democracy. And folks, I hate to bring it up every time, but this doesn't end nicely. There will be military in our streets. I think as soon as this summer. I think the protests will heat up this summer and it's going to get bad. We're going to hear of protesters being shot and killed. We're going to have martial law in some of our cities. A fascist brought into power peacefully is never taken out of power peacefully. We need to start steeling ourselves for that inevitability.
Then it goes down smooth. Hey!
All right, folks, thanks for joining me. That's all the time I've got for this morning. The Radical Russ Show is produced, directed, researched, written, recited, posted, and catered by me, Radical Russ Belville, and governed by Creative Commons Share-alike licensing. My main theme is We Love the Herb by Herbal Nation, and interstitial music is by freestockmusic.com and VTEMO, courtesy of freetouse.com/music. You can contact me by email at radicalruss@gmail.com, call my message line at 877-RUSS-420, that's 877-877-420, and reach me on social media on Blue Sky as @radicalruss.com and nowhere else. You may notice this podcast comes free of advertisement and host reads. That's because I hate shilling for money. I hate everything about interfacing with capitalism. But I do need money. So if you'd like to send me some, you can donate at Radical Russ on Venmo, $RadRuss on Cash App, or via PayPal on my website at radicalruss.com. Get this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, my website, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and until next time, take care of each other.